Managing secure access to cloud resources is getting more complex, and a misconfiguration can easily turn into a major breach. That's why there's Teleport. Teleport is the easiest, most secure way to access your cloud infrastructure. The open source Teleport Access Plane consolidates everything you need for secure access to your Windows and Linux servers, Kubernetes clusters, databases, and internal applications like AWS Management Console, Jenkins, GitLab, Grafana, and much more. Teleport's unique approach is not only more secure, it also improves developer productivity. Download Teleport today at goteleport.com/cloudcast. That's goteleport.com/cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. We move into February of 2022, and weather's starting to change a little bit. The sun's starting to stay up in the sky a little bit longer, at least in certain parts of the world. And hope everybody is doing well. Apologies up front. I am publishing this one a little bit later than usual on Sunday. It is a Sunday perspective show. Some things got in the way of being able to publish it first thing in the morning. So apologies to anybody who typically listens to the show first thing. I know sometimes I've got some shows that I really enjoy listening to it at a certain time of day, and so I apologize for that. We will try and get back on schedule for next week. But with that, we're going to kind of get to a topic, well, I guess sort of the intersection of two topics that sort of crossed my path this past week or so, and I thought it was sort of interesting. I kind of wanted to dig into it. The first one was I gave it, a couple of things. The Kubernetes documentary from the CNCF came out this last week-ish or so. So I put links to that in the show notes for those of you that are interested in history and kind of how we got to where we were. They do a very good job, lots of interviews with a lot of people who were around at the early stages of Kubernetes, from the folks at Google to, folks around the industry, CoreOS, Red Hat, a lot of other Microsoft and a lot of others. So good two-part documentary. Take you maybe 45 minutes to watch both of those. But I did an interview this week with an online platform called The Next Platform. And one of the questions they asked me was, is how close are we to Kubernetes being complete? And it kind of got me thinking, and, again, technology is weird in that we never really think things are complete. And then the other one that sort of got me thinking was there was an article, survey article that come out from O'Reilly, and it was really looking at, kind of the trends that they've been seeing over the last year or so. Again, O'Reilly being in the training business, online media business, and so forth. And one of the things that jumped out at me was they were seeing a significant drop in people having interest in serverless. And the reason these two things, while they might seem slightly different and not related, was, on one hand, as somebody who lives in the Kubernetes sort of world, as I do in my day job, one of the questions that we've constantly sort of gotten bombarded with over the last, 4, 5, 6 years was, is Kubernetes the next big thing, or containers the next big thing, I guess is really the question. And Kubernetes sort of was an ancillary to that. Or should we just skip containers altogether? If we were at VMs before, maybe we skip containers altogether and go right to serverless, right? So it was kind of this, question of what's next, essentially what it was. And what I thought was interesting was, we always were getting these questions, what's next? Is containers next after virtual machines, since virtual machines have been so dominant both on premises in data centers and obviously in the public cloud and so forth. So what was next? And so it was really interesting to me that, here we are in the beginning of 22, and people are sort of in parallel saying, well, not only am I curious if Kubernetes has sort of run its course in terms of being, somewhat feature complete. That was kind of the question, but it was sort of like, hey, has the momentum around Kubernetes sort of stopped? But at the same time, the thing that was supposed to be the next big thing, at least from one very reputable sort of training source, is saying, hey, we're just not seeing the interest in it. And so it kind of got me thinking, like, what's causing these two things? Is this, an actual thing, or is this just a media thing? And so I thought what might be sort of interesting to dig into is to explore sort of the intersection of those two things right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by CloudZero. For software-driven companies focused on growing margins, CloudZero is the only cloud cost intelligence platform that puts engineering in control by connecting technical decisions to business results. By analyzing cloud services like AWS and Snowflake, CloudZero provides real-time cost insights that help you maximize margins. Engineering teams can answer critical questions like, who are my most expensive customers? How much does this specific feature cost our business? What's the cost impact of re-architecting this application? With cost anomaly alerts via Slack, product-specific data views, and granular engineering context that makes it easy to investigate any cost, CloudZero is your complete cloud cost intelligence platform, connecting the dots between high-level trends and individual line items. Join companies like Drift, Rapid7, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started today. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. Datadog is a SaaS cloud monitoring and security platform that enables full-stack observability for modern infrastructure and applications at any scale, providing teams dashboarding, alerting, application performance monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, UX monitoring, security monitoring, and log management in one tightly integrated platform, plus 450 plus out-of-the-box integrations with technologies including cloud providers, databases, and web servers. Aggregate all your data into one platform for seamless correlation, enabling teams to troubleshoot and collaborate together in one place, preventing downtime and enhancing performance and reliability. Get started with a free 14-day trial by visiting datadog.com/cloudcast. That's datadog.com/cloudcast. And we're back. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I want to kind of dig into this intersection of a couple of things that just, they might be a random coincidence, completely random coincidence, that they both sort of popped out at the same time. But this timing of both, people kind of exploring what's going on with Kubernetes, how mature is it? Is it getting towards the end of its innovation cycle and so forth? But yet, not that many people really kind of digging into serverless. And again, that's from a training perspective. And so the two of those things kind of got me thinking. And again, one of the things that comes up when you, are expected to sort of have some foresight into what's going on in the future of a technology. So like in my day job, a lot of people are asking me, where's the future of certain things going in this cloud native space? And obviously one of the nice things that we get as a benefit of doing this podcast is we get to talk to so many really smart people, interact with them on Twitter and Slack and other places, and obviously interview folks, is we do get, a broader perspective on what's going on. Different, people who interact with companies using the technology, building the technology, exploring the technology. So we sort of get, some sort of future looks of what's going on. And it really kind of got me thinking, these two things got me thinking, is there anything to, this sort of, are we in between cycles, right? We always seem to be very fascinated with when will technology cycles start and when do technology cycles end? And obviously, I understand at a very high level that there's a lot of people that are interested in that. There are people who obviously are making technology bets on the future, right? They are trying to figure out like which technology should we invest in, or which technology should we stop investing as much in? Those types of questions as a an end consumer of technology. You've got people in financial markets who are trying to make bets, if you will, buy and sell stock, and all sorts of VC funding based on those things. And we have this real big fascination with not only the origin stories of new technology, right? Like what's coming next, but how did they get started? Who are the people behind it? We sort of romanticize the founders, the origin stories of these things, or like in these Kubernetes documentaries, sort of the origin story of how this project came out of Google and the people behind it, and the struggles they had and all that sort of stuff. And then for whatever reason, we also kind of romanticize, well, not romanticize, but we publicize, and we love to talk about and look back upon sort of the end of certain things, or what feels like sort of the death of certain things. And I mentioned that, and I'm as guilty as anybody. We've done a number of shows that were kind of looking back, lessons learned. We did a number of those last year. We did lessons learned looking at, Cloud Foundry technologies and Docker technologies and OpenStack technologies. And, maybe at some point we'll do that with Kubernetes as well. I don't know, maybe with serverless as well. But, we sort of have this fascination with the origin stories of technology and sort of the end of it. And to a certain extent, I understand that. There are people who are trying to figure out, well, should I still be aligning the work I do in my career to these things, or should I be looking at something next? And obviously there are, pros and cons to being an expert at something that's in high demand, but also maybe, a few minutes smarter or more knowledgeable for something that's brand new, right? We're seeing, all sorts of new things pop up. So, there's always a little bit of that you're trying to figure out for your career. Should I be, focused on being really deep in one or two subjects right now that are highly used, or should I sort of branch out and focus on the next new thing? We're always seeing that. We're always seeing that with investors and so forth. And it made me wonder, why do we have such disdain, I guess, if you will, or sort of lack of caring for what happens in between, right? In between, all I guess we sort of care about is like the scoreboard, who's winning, who's losing. But, in the sense of Kubernetes, for example, when the question was asked to me, I thought it was a fair question. They were trying to draw some comparisons to things like, Linux and, how long did it take for Linux to mature, and, are there going to be parallels between Linux and Kubernetes? But it also got me a little bit frustrated because, if you ask most people that work in the Kubernetes community, while they're proud of how far the technology's come along and we're 20 plus number of releases in and all sorts of, things have come out of it, at the same time, some really fundamental things don't work very well, or aren't great. So for example, there are article after article written about, why is the developer experience around Kubernetes so difficult? Why is it, sometimes so difficult to adopt Kubernetes? Maybe it's for developers, maybe it's for whatever kinds of applications. So there are still a lot of things that people are very frustrated about with Kubernetes, right? And so the idea that, we're at a stage, Kubernetes is 7, maybe 8 years old now, we're in 8th year or so, that it's done or it's complete, can be a little bit frustrating for that. Now, I understand if you're in the media, it's you're there to write, life and death stories. We like three things. We like origin stories, we like death, and we like scoreboards. Maybe that's just what we do in technology. The other part about it that was interesting, and Kubernetes has kept people's attention for a long time, right? On one hand, it was the thing after virtualization. Fine, right? Virtualization was a big deal, whether it was, VMware's massive dominance in the data center, or whether it was, the fact that, AWS, Azure, and Google were offering sort of virtual machines on demand up in the cloud. And, so virtual machines, were those core technologies and really well understood and so forth. And then containers came along, and there was all the buzz of, does containers and hence Kubernetes, does that replace virtual machines? Oh, okay, well, that's a big transition. Lots of new learnings. Maybe there's lots of new companies, winners and losers, scoreboards, all that sort of stuff. So we're fascinated by that. And then, but again, what happens in the middle? And Kubernetes was interesting to us because it had this romantic origin story, right? It came out of Google. Google was going to do something they'd never done before. Then it became open source. There was foundations around it from people that didn't understand foundations. And there were, some winners and losers, right? And I don't mean losers in the sense of bad people, but there were a number of companies who got acquired, right? So CoreOS or Heptio or, even Red Hat got acquired by IBM because, kind of Kubernetes was at the core of what they were doing, or, lots of others have been acquired in the Kubernetes space over the years. So, it's kept people's interest if you're really only interested in, kind of keeping score, kind of betting from the side, if you will, those types of things. And it's seen people move around and all those sort of things. Now, what's really kind of gotten me interested, though, that piece by itself is fine. But what's interesting is, we tend to be fascinated with this idea that one thing replaces the other, right? That somehow technology is binary. And I think one of the things that, Aaron and I have said over and over again on this show and, for years and years is technology is not binary, right? It's very rare that, one technology completely replaces something else, especially when we're talking about technology that's more enterprise technology, right? In the consumer space, we see these things happen all the time, right? Like BlackBerry literally just stopped making phones. Like a few days ago, they announced, hey, we're turning off all BlackBerry services. Now, it's been, 10 years or so, I think. I forget what the date of the iPhone was. I mean, the iPhone and smartphones have completely replaced sort of BlackBerry as a, non-smartphone. But okay, maybe that's a replacement, but maybe that's also, just an evolution of technology. You can look at it different ways. But in the enterprise, we don't tend to ever replace anything. And so what's weird to me is that, we still have this culture that covers and follows and keeps track of enterprise stuff that assumes things are going to kind of come and go, or, one's going to replace another. And the serverless piece is really fascinating to me in that, you know, Aaron and I covered serverless for a little while, and we still do. We're still very interested in it because we think it's sort of a powerful way of delivering technology, and it's the closest we've seen to anything in terms of sort of, you pay for what you use, right? There are, ways to buy on demand, pay as you go, but to pay for what you actually use at a very, very granular level, serverless is the closest representation of that in the cloud, right? And so from that perspective, that was always fascinating to us. It was always fascinating to us, the people who were building applications that were, at its core, very serverless centric, whether that's, originally sort of compute serverless, or more and more we're seeing, database services, data services that are serverless. So that part of us has always been sort of fascinating. Now, what's interesting to me is that it hasn't sort of captured the landscape, captured the imagination in as broad a way as Kubernetes did, or virtualization did before that, or whatever. And I say that in the context of so many people expected that serverless was going to be sort of a replacement for containers. People were going to skip containers and go right to serverless. And I think what it's sort of panned out to be, and maybe this is just the way we should have thought about it, is serverless is an adjacency to how you're going to build applications. It's not necessarily a direct replacement for those people that are really into serverless. And we've had a number of people on the show who are kind of all in on it. It can be really fascinating. But the flip side of it is, I don't think it's necessarily captured people's attention the same way, because if you look at it from a scoreboard watching perspective, it hasn't had any wars, if you will, right? Yes, we've seen, Azure has functions and Google has like Cloud Run and some things like that. But, Lambda has sort of defined what the serverless market looks like. And to a certain extent, we've begun to see the cloud providers start to have, like I said, serverless data functions, so serverless database and so forth. But in terms of the thing that we distinctly think of as serverless, it's Lambda. And, when I look at those Kubernetes documentaries, one of the documentaries is an origin story. The second documentary is essentially, what were the wars that were fought, or, what appeared to be the wars that were fought over Kubernetes between vendors and between Google and Amazon, and, whether there should be a foundation or not foundation. Serverless really didn't have any wars, right? I mean, we've seen some alternative technologies that are used. Knative has been out there, from the CNCF and those things, but didn't really have wars, which people tend to like for whatever reason, in terms of kind of watching and measuring and stack ranking. And we really haven't seen any major startup acquisitions yet. Yes, there's been a few here and there. Maybe our friends at TriggerMesh will be the ones that are really the big thing. But, so it sort of hasn't had that thing that we keep score against, that we measure, quote unquote, winners and losers, that we go, oh, well, if that company gets acquired, then what's the next domino to fall, right? And we sort of see other parts of the ecosystem, things that have been funded by VCs happen. And so it's been really interesting to, if I put those two things together, Kubernetes has fascinated people because it sort of had all the things that we sort of fall in love with, I guess, as a technology industry, right? It had the potential to be the next big thing, right, after virtualization. So it was sort of an infrastructure thing, but it also was kind of a weird thing because it touched developers and DevOps and DevSecOps. And so, it was sort of had next thing potential. It had touches a lot of different technology segments potential. It had some wars, if you will. It had winners and losers. So it had some scoreboard watching. And what's weird is, again, we're in this cycle of, like, it had an origin story, which was, really romantic and well known, and we've seen it grow, we've seen it measurement in the middle, and for some reason now we're chasing its end story when it doesn't really show any signs of sort of having an end, if you will. And then we contrast that to serverless. Serverless had an origin story. The origin story was, kind of a short announcement at AWS reInvent about 2014. There was a lot of buzz. We had things like Serverless Conf, which the good folks at A Cloud Guru used to do. It sort of faded away as we had some of the pandemic stuff, and it hasn't really re-engaged, reinvigorated itself, unfortunately. And now we're beginning to see a little bit of some downturn in terms of interest in the thing. So, maybe not every technology that's supposed to be the big thing, has sort of an origin story, an interesting middle with scorekeeping and wars and winners and losers, and an end story. Maybe something like serverless is really just going to be, for a lot of people, a nice ancillary, augmentation technology. Yes, if you're all in on it, that's great. I'm not downplaying it, but maybe that's what it's going to be. And that's okay. And maybe that's the whole point of this whole sort of long ramble that I've gone on is it's okay that serverless is what it is. It's okay that, Kubernetes, still has so many things to do. And for some odd reason, people want to see if it has an end. But it's it's kind of a weird way that we look at things in our industry. We kind of have this template. We want it to fit the template, and then it doesn't always fit the template. And what's really weird to me is that in the middle, we seem to be so okay with, yes, there's going to be learning curves, and the learning curves are going to be strange sometimes. But more importantly, we're really okay with technical debt. We're okay with not finishing projects. And I don't know if that's a great thing for our industry. I think we've seen, we've had these people, we've had different people on the show, tons and tons of ways to try and make the developer experience in Kubernetes really great. And, universally as an industry, I think we sort of go, haven't really gotten there yet. But will that be the next sort of big story of Kubernetes? I don't know. We seem to be okay with that just being technical debt, and it moves on. So it's interesting. It's just those two things as I put them together, and I think about how they kind of got started in parallel. They were there for different reasons. And they're kind of going in slightly different directions. And I think to a certain extent, the industry thought one was going to follow the other, one was going to replace the other. And I don't think we've seen those dynamics play out, and that's okay. I don't know what that necessarily means in terms of what is next after a serverless or a containers Kubernetes. Maybe there doesn't need to be anything next. Maybe there's just going to be, maybe the next thing is just new ways to actually build infrastructure now, or, build applications now that, the options of infrastructure have become more mature. Maybe they've become boring, right? Because we're talking about them at the end. We're not trying to learn as much about them. Maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe that is the logical conclusion that we're getting out of this. But sort of an interesting, just parallel of two things this week that got me thinking. And, I sort of rambled a little bit here for last 15 minutes or so, but always would love your feedback. Always interested in, how you all see the Kubernetes market, how you see the serverless market. Do you see them as complementary to one another? Do you see them as replacements to one another? I know the market has tried to sort of play those stories out. Different vendors have opinions, different technology groups have opinions, and so again, I think it's just interesting to sort of watch things that maybe were expected to be kind of sequential have turned out to be somewhat parallel, and it's interesting to kind of see how they've evolved and what the second order effects will be for both of those. So I'm going to wrap up with that. Hope everybody's doing well. Again, apologies for getting this one out late. Hopefully you still get some time to listen to it on Sunday or Monday morning on your walk. Maybe it'll be just an interesting refresh to have it on Monday morning instead of Sunday morning for you. So anyways, hope everybody's doing well. Thanks for listening. As always, thanks for telling a friend. Thanks for helping us grow the community. We're very, very thankful for all of you, for all of the sponsors that help us make the show work. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for giving us feedback. Thanks for giving us, 5-star ratings in all the ways that you do. We've seen a big uptick in that. And so we're very, 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 very thankful and appreciative of that as well. So with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.